is here. I'm Mr. Hughes and this is Noam Chomsky. In the next few minutes, we're going to take you on the ride of your learning life. Not necessarily, but we are going to try to cover the 14th Amendment. So if you're a United States history student in an American government course, middle school, high school, even maybe a college intro course, this lecture is for you. Or if you're just kind of crazy on the internet, we accept those types of people too. But either way, we're going to chop it up nice and easy and serve it on a bed of learning. So here we go. Get ready for the 14th Amendment. Context. Context is everything. So first you want to group the 14th Amendment with the Reconstruction Amendments. That means it was passed following the Civil War. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. That was passed when Abraham Lincoln was still alive. And then when the Radical Republicans took over the next Congress by 1868, they were ready for using the 14th Amendment as a way for the southern states to re-enter the Union. So therefore it's kind of a coerced amendment. It's not a naturally flowing amendment. But nevertheless, it's written into the Constitution. And anybody who wants to complain about that should probably be ready to give Manhattan back to the Native Americans. But nevertheless, it is in the Constitution. So what does it really say? It really deals with the problem that the Supreme Court dredged up under Dred Scott. In 1857, right before the outbreak of the Civil War, the Supreme Court kind of solved once and for all the issue of slavery by determining that all African Americans, or Africans that were brought to America, are not citizens of the United States. So, years before that, Congress, during sectionalism, had kind of tried to put Band-Aids on the problem and tried to solve it with popular sovereignty and with Missouri Compromise lines. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court, by deciding African Americans were not citizens, that kind of probably sped up the reasons for the Civil War. But nevertheless, the 14th Amendment is designed to correct that Supreme Court decision. All right, so let's look at the 5 sections. We're going to come back to section 1, which is really kind of the entree of the 14th Amendment. The second part, or the second section of the 14th Amendment, is meant to kind of correct the 3/5 compromise, to make sure that we kind of rephrase that now all citizens, except for Native Americans, are going to be counted towards, full representation. The third section goes to kind of a punitive measure against the former leaders of the Confederate America, which is going to prohibit them from serving as kind of leaders in Congress or in representation in Washington. So they're not going to be allowed to do that unless they get 2/3 of Congress's vote. The 5th section basically says that Congress has the ability to enforce these previous 4 sections, but it's section 1 that's the important one. So we're going to read it out loud. We might break it up a little bit, but we're definitely going to put it up on the screen for you. So here we go, 14th Amendment, section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. Okay, so there you go. Dred Scott is dead, right? So therefore, everybody that was born in the United States, which means all slaves who were born here, are automatic citizens. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdictions the equal protection of the laws. So therefore you have kind of 2 sections, saying everybody gets equal protection, states give your citizens equal protection, and don't mess with due process. All right, Plessy v. Ferguson. This is the big one, right? Plessy v. Ferguson is 1896, and it's the first chance that the Supreme Court has to basically use the 14th Amendment to protect a black person from their state government. This is, the test case in federalism and civil rights. And the Supreme Court drops the ball. The Supreme Court states that separate could be equal, that separate but equal in a sense, that if the Separate Car Act is saying, blacks on this train and whites on this train, that doesn't mean that they're not equal separate halves. Now, of course, that's just laughable looking at the surface and the reality of the situation in the South. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court, by doing that, is basically saying that Jim Crow is constitutional. So, therefore, we're going to have decades and decades of Southern legal segregation discrimination. Now, we fast forward to 1954, and this is the other court case you need to know. If you're writing an essay, you start with Plessy and you end with Brown versus Board of Ed. And this, of course, is where the Supreme Court looks at a Kansas law that segregates children by race in schools and says, no, I don't think so. All right, we're going to grow up here, and separate is not equal. That separate is inherently unequal. And if you ever research that court case, it's really interesting because they talk about the psychology of race segregation back then and how the children that were being segregated had self-esteem issues, and so did the racist children too. So it's not good for anybody. But nevertheless, the 14th Amendment, therefore, has now kind of come, full roundhouse kick. And now it's going to be enforced, first by Dwight Eisenhower in the Little Rock Nine, sending troops down there. And now we have seen basically the 14th Amendment kind of grow. In the 1960s, you have a series of court cases called the Warren Court cases, where the Supreme Court is going to selectively incorporate some of those other amendments using the 14th Amendment. So for instance, in Ohio, a court case called Mapp versus Ohio, when the police barge in on Miss Mapp without a warrant looking for a suspect, and Miss Mapp was an older lady, and she stuck the fake warrant down her bosom, and the police probably didn't like that, too much, so they started digging through her house and they found pornography. Yes, I said old lady and I said pornography. Ew. But nevertheless, that was evidence that was used against her in a trial. So when she goes to the Supreme Court and states, hey, they didn't have a warrant, basically she's saying the 4th Amendment has been broken, but so is the 14th, because my state is denying me due process. That's called selective incorporation of the 4th Amendment. And you have other court cases like Miranda, where they read suspect their rights, and where everybody gets a lawyer, Gideon versus Wainwright, and happy day, the 14th Amendment. And of course, the 14th Amendment hasn't been kind of trying to be expanded, and now there's court cases that are going to the Supreme Court dealing with gay marriage, and gay Americans who are saying that if you have a different set of laws for my people, then you're violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, right? That would be great because I want to live like an EDU gangster. You also want to make sure that you subscribe to my EDU friends, the other gurus down there that are doing some really great things in some of the other disciplines. And I put some links to some EDU geniuses that'll just make your brain wrinkle from here to the moon. Whether it's Crash Course or ViHard or Vsauce or Smarter Every Day, there's so many channels I don't even know what to say anymore. So where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you next time when you come into the house of learning.